In the first 100 days of a newly elected Bligh Labor government, we will continue the appointment of a Chief Practitioner who will lead the development of the new service to provide high-level clinical advice to the Director-General of the Department of Communities. This person will provide strategic direction to ensure child safety staff are up to date with the world's best practice. We will continue our record investment in child safety. Since 2004, we've quadrupled the budget to $733 million and doubled the staffing numbers to ensure that we can meet the needs of the community. Compare this to the newly elected Liberal National Government in New South Wales, which implemented cuts to foster care allowance, or the Liberal National Government in Victoria, which is planning to reduce 500 jobs from the department. This is what Liberals and Nationals do, unfortunately. They adopt the slash and burn mentality against the most vulnerable. We're not going to rest on our laurels, but we're going to build on our achievements as part of our continued commitment to help at-risk children and young people reach their full potential. This includes working to deliver our Fair Queensland blueprint. Our whole of Department of Communities approach, rather than a standalone department, ensures that we have a no wrong door, so families at-risk children can access the right support at the right time. I'm acutely aware of the overrepresentation of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children in the child protection system and committed to driving this number down by providing better responses and practices which deliver positive outcomes for families. We value the partnership we have had with our strong and independent peak bodies, which continue to provide a bright future for Queenslanders, most vulnerable children and young people. There are three things that concern me about the LNP promises to child protection. The first is that the LNP and Campbell Newman appear to be seriously confused about the intent of the Ford inquiry, the role it played in providing closure to the victims of childhood abuse in Queensland's institutions. The second point is the LNP has confirmed that the cost of their new Ford inquiry will be met from the existing child protection budget. We know Victoria's child protection inquiry, completed last month, cost $2.4 million. For the original Ford inquiry, in today's terms, was about $3.7 million. The LNP need to be very clear and tell people which services or how many staff will be cut to pay for this new inquiry. The third and final point is the LNP's only other child protection promise is $6.5 million worth of unfunded commitments, which largely doubles on existing services we are already providing funding for. Campbell Newman says the LNP will revitalise frontline services. However, there hasn't been a single new child safety officer budgeted with their new policies. In stark contrast, the 2010-11 budget by the Bligh Labor government had 35 new child safety officers. The 2011-12, 20 new officers. On top of this, we have just recently that the government committed to 15 new child safety officers positions from our voluntary separation packages.
I'm very pleased to be able to respond on behalf of the LNP to PeakCare's election issues. I believe, and the LNP believes, that the protection of vulnerable children and support for families must be a priority. To this end, an LNP government will revitalise frontline child protection services and restore accountability in government. I believe that under this tired 20-year Labor government, child protection has lost its way and that we need to focus on the delivery of services that actually work. Hard-working people like our frontline staff and people working passionately every day in organisations like PeakCare deserve a fresh start. The LNP is determined to work very closely with independent peak bodies and the non-government sector to get child protection back on track. We are committed to significantly improving and strengthening Queensland's child protection services to better help vulnerable children and their families in times of crisis. And I'm committed to taking the lead in seeing an LNP government placing greater focus on getting action on the basics by implementing appropriate intervention services, as well as better identification and follow-up for families at risk. Under this Labor government, there are more than 8,000 children living away from home, with 7,000 of these in some form of foster care arrangement. This is simply not sustainable and must stop. I'm committed to getting better outcomes for the record levels of money being spent in child protection. You have to wonder why, under Labor, a record $733 million is being spent, but the system continues to struggle. In order to get child protection back on track, we need a circuit breaker. We can't keep going down the same path Labor has set, where more and more children are taken from their families and placed into care, and child protection staff struggle under the unrealistic caseloads. That's why a priority of an LNP government is to establish a new inquiry to review progress and to chart a new roadmap for child protection for the next decade. Successive Labor governments have failed to take on board or successfully implement recommendations from both the Ford and CMC investigations into the child protection system. We need to get right things like how to reduce the number of children in out-of-home care, how we can reduce the caseloads of child safety officers. We have to build resilient families, looking at out-of-home care options, unlike this Labor government's unacceptably high reliance on commercial accommodation and residential group homes, even for very young children. How the non-government sector can play a more strategic role in child protection, and to fully audit child protection legislation to ensure that it's meeting its intended objective of protecting children. The LNP is determined to get child protection services back on track after years of Labor waste and mismanagement.